What's up, you guys? Void here, coming back at y'all with some more Rivals of Ixalan videos. Just gonna go color by color here. We're gonna start it off with white. I'm going to give you guys my opinion of each card from the new set, whether or not I think it's playable in limited as a whole, or just good for sealed, which is going to be pre-released this weekend. First card we're going to look at here is Ixalan Primal Dawn, the huge 8-drop 4/8 white legendary dinosaur, elder dinosaur I should say. Flying, double strike, vigilance, trample, indestructible, all amazing keywords. The only downside to a card like this is that it is super expensive. It is just as susceptible to a lot of the good removal that is in limited. Believe it or not, there are a lot of arrest type effects, claustrophobia effects that are going to shut this down, that are usually going to be first picked for removal. So while it is amazing and it should definitely be in your deck if you really have nothing better, and it's usually something you're going to build around as well, you should probably also put in some decent ramp if you're going to be playing some 8-drops, but it is a good looking dinosaur. We have Forerunner of the Legion, and there are 3 other Forerunners that are good, tutoring up a creature, putting it on the top of your deck. This one does it for vampires, so if you're playing a decent number of vampires, the more likely you are to consider a card like this, but I think they're pretty good for limited. Then we have a 5-mana Trapjaw Tyrant 5/5, good value in white. Obviously something I would build an entire deck around. It's pretty good. I would ignore what some people might say, oh, when it gets destroyed, whenever it's gone, whenever it leaves the battlefield, you give all those creatures back. Yeah, that is a big downside, but it's still worth playing. I mean, you get good value in the creature to begin with, and you can obviously just start clearing the board. Creatures have to block, so that's going to be dealing damage. You're going to exile more creatures. It's going to be worth it. I think it's definitely one of the better cards in white for sure. And we have Bishop of Binding, basically your Banisher Priest effect, but it can also help you out in combat. Gives +X until end of turn, where X is the power of the exiled card. It is a bit iffy because it is 4 mana. It's a 1/1. It's incredibly vulnerable, but you're likely going to play removal regardless of how you can get it, so I still think it's playable. Paladin of Atonement is a little weak to start off. It's not exactly what you want out of your 2-drops. You want something with a little bit more power toughness to get in there early, but if you are dealt damage, it does get bigger, and when it dies, you can gain some life. So it is good, but maybe not something I would depend on to get in some damage early. It's still worth playing though. Then we have Radiant Destiny, 3-mana enchantment. Actually something I didn't think was going to be worth it in limited, but seeing as doing some sealed simulators, vampires actually look kind of viable in limited, so I definitely think it could be worth it. A good anthem. Also gives vigilance if you have the city's blessing, which is also something that is more viable than some people would think. I think it's definitely a good card. Slaughter the Strong is a good board wipe. Basically smite the monstrous for every creature. You get to protect creatures that are power 4 or less, so you're probably going to throw this into something like a vampire deck where there aren't too many big vampires. I could definitely see that being playable there. Sphinx's Decree is something I would stay away from. Instants and sorceries, they see some play in limited, but it's not going to dominate, and stopping your opponent from casting an instant or sorcery during that player's next turn and just that next turn is a bit weak, even if it is just 2 mana. Temple Altisaur is also something I would say if you're playing dinosaurs, play it, but if you're not, stay away from it. There are some enrage triggers that could benefit from this, preventing all but 1 damage. They're still getting dealt that damage. It won't be enough to kill them, but it's going to be enough to trigger their enrage, which is always pretty cool with dinosaurs. Blazing Hope is a 1-drop, little instant, sort of the Swords to Plowshares Path to Exile of the set, but it is terrible. It's something I would stay away from. Usually late game, if you're backed into a corner to the point where getting rid of 1 creature would save you, that's almost never going to happen. Most of the time your opponents are going to have a bunch of creatures. They're going to outnumber you. Getting rid of their best creature even isn't going to be enough, so not that good. Then we have Majestic Helioteris, I believe that's how you pronounce it. 4-drop for a 2/2 flyer. When it attacks another target dinosaur you control, gains flying until end of turn. We had another flyer like this in the previous set, Ixalan, but I believe it did it for just creatures in general, so this is significantly weaker that it only does it for dinosaurs, but it's still good. Anytime you can give other creatures flying in addition to the flyer you already have, and it's on an attack trigger, so I mean that's even better. You're going to be dealing more damage with more evasion. Then we have Imperial Ceratops, 5 mana for a 3/5 body. Isn't too impressive, but it does have an enrage trigger. Whenever Imperial Ceratops is dealt damage, you gain 2 life. I believe there was a 3-drop green dinosaur that had the same exact enrage trigger, which didn't really seem that great in green, but in white kind of works out pretty well with some vampires that also work well with life gain triggers. Everdawn Champion is fantastic, a 2/2 for 3 mana. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to her, which is just ridiculous when you think about about it. You just sit back, let her block for you. She's gonna stay alive. And if she does get like claustrophobia or something like that, she's still just 3 mana, so you're not investing too much mana into something that's going to put in a lot of work for you. I like her. Then we have Pride of Conquerors, 2 mana instant with the Ascend trigger. So if you have 10 or more permanents, it does something else. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, and they get +2/+2 until end of turn instead if you have the City's Blessing. So this card is definitely playable. Definitely, considering how viable I think vampires are now, tokens in general, especially in white. You have some decent cheap flyers. You have some decent cheap unblockable creatures in blue as well. Some also pretty good flyers there. I think giving +1/+1 until end of turn is always pretty good. +2/+2 is even better. Baffling End is not completely useless as removal, but there are only so many creatures that are going to give us that much trouble that are CMC 3 or less. So paying 2 mana to exile it when you're also running the risk of giving them a 3/3 green dinosaur with trample, that's pretty steep, but I still think it's a good filler card if you absolutely have to. You don't have any other good removal. Famished Paladin is actually something I would play in the majority of the white decks. Even if he doesn't untap for the majority of the game, it's still a 3/3 for 2 mana, which is just insane value. It has to have some sort of drawback. From the fact that life gain isn't impossible, it's easy to untap him. It's not going to be that big of a deal, even if he doesn't untap, because you're still going to likely swing and get some 3 damage in there early on if your opponents don't block. I mean, that's turn 2, that's pretty good. And then you have one of the best cards in white, Skymarcher Aspirant, 1 mana for a 2/1 with Ascend. And Skymarcher Aspirant has flying as long as you have the City's Blessing. This card is insane. This card could have easily have been printed as a rare because it is that good. We've had 2/1s for 1 mana before. I believe there was one in Theros that was also a rare. It's not even anywhere near as good as this. Late game it has some value if you have the City's Blessing as a flyer. Always good to have evasion. And early, getting 2 power for 1 mana is fantastic. Easily a good first pick in draft. If your rare is terrible, I can't really see any reason why you wouldn't want to go with this. Sanguine Glorifier, a little bit more specific towards vampires, but I always love giving +1/+1 counters on creatures, so I would definitely pick it for a vampire deck. And it's decent, 3/3 for 4 mana. Okay. Then we have Luminous Bond, one of your arrest effects. Enchanted creature can attack or block for 3 mana. That seems to be standard now. Always love these cards. They're not technically removal, but they pretty much get the job done. Deal with the most important part of the creature in limited, which is power and toughness, as well as evasion, making it so they can't block. Legion Conquistador gets a reprint. Don't necessarily know why, but if you have 3 or more of them, I might consider it for a vampire deck. If not, probably stay away. Exultant Skymarcher is another good flyer. In white, it's probably one of the best. 2/3 flyer for 3 mana is incredible. Usually if you get multiples of these, you know exactly what you're going to do. And usually when I get some decent white flyers, I always look at blue to see if I have any good evasive blue creatures or even some good blue flyers. And I usually make blue-white flyers and kind of just go with that. And it never really goes wrong. Also has a synergy of being a vampire, so you can go that route as well. Divine Verdict is removal. It's 4 mana, instant speed, but it's still good removal. Destroying a target attacking or blocking creature. Why the heck not? I would rather settle on this type of removal than just settle on an average creature, which we have next here in Snubhorn Sentry. Pretty average. 0/3 for 1 mana. Some people are going to say, oh, it has late game playability. Yeah, but usually with a 1-drop, you want to have some sort of impact early in the game, which is the difference between the 1-drop vampire and this, is that she actually has early game value as well as late game value. This is just kind of bad earlier in the game. Yeah, it's going to block some of their creatures, but late game, it's a 3/3 with no other abilities. It's okay, but not something I would really consider anything more than a filler. Raptor Companion gets another reprint, another good filler creature. Actually pretty good, 3/1 for 2. Martyr of Dusk, 2/1 for 2. When it dies, you get a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Definitely if you get some good 2-drops, it's always going to be a good reason to play white. White has some awesome cheap creatures. This one is no different. Also good for Vampire Tribal if you want to go tokens as well. Sun Sentinel is another filler creature. 2/2 vigilance for 2 mana. Doesn't really fit into any tribe, but it's a good filler at the very least. Squire's Devotion. I love enchantments like these that give lifelink or other keywords. It also gives you a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink as well. Awesome value for 3 mana. If you want to go vampires, why not? It's a perfect card. Gonna gain you some life as well. Moment of Triumph might just be one of the more underrated cards I think people might overlook. 1 mana for +2/+2 until end of turn. You gain 2 life. It's going to double as removal, obviously, or it's going to gain you some life, help you stay in the game, deal more damage, whatever you want to do. It's kind of versatile, so I think it's pretty underrated, but if you have better removal, I don't think I would put it in over better removal. Suncrested Pterodon is 5 mana for a 2/5 flyer, has vigilance as long as you control another dinosaur, so that's kind of iffy, but it is still a good flyer. 2 power is weak, but 5 toughness isn't. Kind of a filler if you want to make a dinosaur deck or just a good flyer deck in general. If you need that evasion, it's there. And Cleansing Ray is the final card in white we have to look at. 2 mana sorcery, you can destroy a vampire or an enchantment, which is easy to overlook, but mainly the enchantment removal is something I would consider paying attention to, especially for sideboarding. You get to destroy a vampire. I think there's going to be some decent vampire decks in Limited, so I would consider this for both enchantment removal and dealing with a pretty viable deck. So anyway guys, that's going to do it for my review of white for Rivals of Ixalan pre-release, or just Limited in general. It should also help you for draft if you want to go to draft weekend. I think it's pretty good. It's probably the best color out of the 5. I might say green would be better, but we're going to get to that video last. Anyway, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here, signing off.